we back once again. Today we're going to look at SPX next to SPY. So here's something that I do sometimes is look at, since SPX has expirations every single day, you can look at these for a little bit more accurate picture of where the market's going to go for that day. Keep it in context with SPY as well, but SPY you're only going to get the 3 expiries versus the SPX 5. So every day with SPX you can get a volatility trigger for that day. You can see exactly where the net gamma exposure is for that day versus trying to play that day in context with tomorrow's GEX expiry. So it's still useful to look at the next days and look at SPY because there's a lot of hedging and things that go on in SPY as well. A lot of times they line up. Like in today's case, you'll see SPX is just a massive pin looking to take place here at 3,900, and would be looking at the 3950s to the upside as long as we remain above these volatility triggers. 3875 would be today's, and then the total, that total is just for 98 days of worth of gamma. That's the vol trigger for the next 98 days worth of gamma. So your max pain sitting here at 38.85. I'm not sure how that plays in. It looks like it was a little bit of a support in the pre-market today. So we'll see if that this continues to be support down here. Looking at the chart on the 1 hour, we see some resistance up here in this area into the second and to the first and second resistance on the pivot points. This was last week's open, essentially, last week's close. You can see it's running into resistance there. It just happens to be a pivot point resistance as well. And we're sitting inside of this giant breaker block, essentially, and into another one. So there's a lot of resistance up here. It looks like there's sort of a range developed here on the 1 hour. So I would not be surprised to see a pullback at open, only to get bought up again and probably just pin 3,900. And the reason I say that is because the SPX skew right now is a little ridiculous to the upside. I'm not sure if this is some sort of glitch, but the SPYs does not look like that. So we'll see how that plays out. But this sort of tells me that folks are a little bit on either expecting a massive breakout or they're a little bit off sides and calls. Yeah, but given that this is 0%, I would assume that this is some sort of just software glitch or something. But keep an eye on that. I would more assume it looks like this. So the skew, the way it's set up in SPY, sort of always kind of looks like this. This is pretty normal. Nothing out of the ordinary, which would suggest that we're likely probably just going to see buy the dip, pin type action today. So same kind of thing with SPY, 3390, which lines up with that SPX 3900. And that vol triggers, the total vol trigger would be 388. Again, that lines up with this sort of area here. Today's would be 3875. That sort of lines up with that. Max pain doesn't line up. Again, I'm not sure how to use max pain, to be honest with you. So we'll see how that plays out. Now that it's like within the expected ranges, before it was just not even within expected ranges. So now that it is, we'll see how the markets react to those max pain numbers. We're total negative, so we're short-term non-volatile today just because overall we're in a negative gamma environment. So I imagine a lot of that gamma gets worked out throughout the day. Probably not all of it, given it's 637 million. But yeah, so the play today, essentially, if these levels are holding, we're likely to pin 3,900. So personally, I'll be on the lookout for any dips into these areas. Same thing with SPY, any dip into this area, any dips into these areas, just to see if they try to bring it right back up to that 390 or 3,900. Anyways, peace.